Good afternoon and welcome to the May meeting of the Historic Zoning Commission. Brenda, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Linda Anderson.
Here.
Gib Backlund. David Becker.
Here.
Deborah Belcher. Rick Cantrell.
Here.
Paul Cross.
Here.
Jim Thompson.
Here.
Mary Mae White. Here. Kurt Wade.
Here.
Great. We do have a quorum, so I call this meeting to order. Everyone should have received the minutes of the last meeting held on April the 19th. Were there any corrections or additions to those minutes? If not, the chair would welcome a motion to approve as written.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor of accepting the minutes as written, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? They are approved. Thank you, Brenda. Robert, what is our first bit of business today?
Chairman Thompson, excuse me. The first item of business is a request by Steve Wade, who lives at 1012 East Main Street. He's submitting a preliminary drawings for a house he's proposing to build at 1012 East Main Street. I met with him several weeks ago, and he brought in some drawings and a site plan, and we discussed setbacks and heights and things like that, and things that the commission would like to see. He wants to submit this as just a cursory delivery for y'all to take a look at, so he can make some changes at a later submittal date, probably the June meeting. When I sent out the package, I sent out excuse me, drawings that he had submitted at the point in time. Since then, he brought in some drawings today, which are a little bit different than what he submitted in your package, and that includes the site plan. So what we have is drawings of the front elevation, the sides and the rear, and I have the detached garage. We can look at all of them just to get an idea of what he's proposing.
Okay.
Like I say, they're very similar in nature to the package that I sent you. Included in your package, I also took pictures and photographs of the vacant lot and the house on either side. And it's hard to get a scale when you're looking at all three different pictures. But the house, if you're looking at the vacant lot, the house to the left is a large two-story house, and the house to the right of it, close toward the square, is a one-story brick house. So this kind of is somewhere in the middle. It's kind of stepping up or stepping down, however you want to look at it. The house to the left is a little bit taller, and the one to the right is a little bit smaller. So I'll be happy to answer any questions. Mr. Wade's father is in the audience. Mr. Steve Wade couldn't make it today. He had a last-minute cancellation, and he just couldn't make it. So his father's kind of familiar with the project, and he's here actually to just to observe and take comments and notes, and they'll discuss with Steve what we come up with.
Okay. Well, great. Thank you, Robert. If you would like to come to the podium and state your name then to represent your son then in this endeavor.
My name is Ron Wade, and I'm Steve Wade's father.
What questions does the commission have of Mr. Wade?
I noticed that Robert has on the board 3 changes from the front and the 2 west and east elevations, but did the rear elevation stay exactly the same, which is not up there?
I have another board if you want to look at them.
Okay. So it changed a little bit also?
No, not appreciably.
I don't really think that it probably did change. Let me put it on the side.
Could you turn that so we can see it? I like looking at the edge, but But
I don't know that.
I don't know.
let's see.
The rear, of course, we wouldn't be able to see, but I don't think it has changed much at all, David.
I can see a little bit from here.
Well, what are the three
The rear
major
looks
changes?
exactly the same as the one that's in our packet for the rest of our commission.
You can see on the TV screen the images there. You can't see them better on the board.
So that's the garage.
That's the detached garage. One thing I want to add is, when I was looking at the front elevations, I asked Mr. Wade when we met what the height of the chimneys are, and they don't have the exact height on the drawings themselves, but looking at the dimensions of the first floor and the second floor, it looks like the height is going to be above 35 feet. So what he'll have to do is either reduce the height of the chimney to below 35 feet, or go below or go to the Board of Zoning Appeals for a variance.
Of course, there's certain code issues related to the heights of chimneys and to the adjoining roof, which, wherever it's 10 feet away, you have to be so many feet above that for drawing of the smoke. So that's a code issue as well. How does it relate to the adjoining house to the left? Do you know the height of the house to the left?
No, I don't.
I think it'd be important to know, is it taller than the 2-story house to the left? Because it is a 2-story, whereas this appears to almost be 2.5 stories. The dormers may be decorative, and there's not really a room up there. We don't see the floor plans, but you do have dormers on the front, and I think it'd be important to know, how does it compare to the adjoining house on the left? The 1-story I'm not, concerned about.
I'll see if I can get a height when he submits his next proposal, and to have it on there.
One of the great things about the design is of the wing, if you will, to the right steps down to help mitigate the change in height of the adjoining neighbor that's only 1 story on the right. Mm-hmm. And so that'll help with massing it. If it matches up with the one on the left is 2 stories and the one on the right has that low 1-story wing to it, lower wing, it'll help mitigate transitioning from one neighbor to the next. I think that's a great idea.
And what are the 3 major changes? Because I'm having a hard time seeing the board from here.
Well, just by looking at it, I just got these this afternoon. On the porch,
It looks like on the side porch there, he's added the triglyphs and metapes on that very large band that was there. I thought it was too large myself in height, where he's got the little squares there above the columns, that sort of beam, if you will. The triglyphs, he's added an oval window there in lieu of the arched window. I noticed he has a string courser there between the first floor windows, or a water table, if you will, and the vents to the foundation. He's added that horizontal line. He's taken out these squares between the 2 windows that had a black dot. I wondered what those were, and shown a belt course there. He's shown the configuration, it appears, of the windows and the main block.
I can't tell. from here, but it doesn't appear to be brick.
Do we know what that intended material is now on the exterior of the house?
It's supposed to be brick.
It's still brick,
Yeah.
okay. He's paneled out the chimneys, has some recesses or something, if you'll notice, on both the sides and the end elevations that face the front. He's made them more decorative with a different cap on the roof.
What is the roofing material?
Do you know what the roofing material will be?
No, sir, I do
I
not.
think it's asphalt shingle.
Asphalt shingles. I guess for concern to me on the front elevation is the fact that that porch on the side, I think the height of the roof construction is awfully high or thick, whatever word you want to use. I think it needs to be reduced in height. It just seems awfully heavy for the columns for the house, the design. It just appears to be too thick, if you will.
Shorten the height.
Either the columns head, the top of the roof stay the same and the columns get a little higher, or the columns stay where they are and the roof goes down a bit.
Is the third floor going to be occupied, or is it just decorative?
Don't know.
I have the plans there.
There's the 3 dormers on the front, but none on the sides or none on the back based on the elevations.
My opinion is there are rooms up there and they can be used. And
Yeah, there's media room, storage room, playroom.
Okay.
It's going to be built out according to this.
yes, it shows an exercise room and a medium/playroom on third floor.
I noticed that on the front elevation, the main roof and the lower roof, or all the roofs, actually have a little kick to the gutter. It's 2 planes, a slight little curve out or kick, but on none of the side elevations or the rear elevations does that little kick show. Is that kick going to be all the way around the house, or just, I don't know how you would do it just on the front architecturally? It needs to be throughout.
Talk about right in here. This little, right in here.
Yeah,
On the side, just straight down.
yeah.
Okay, I see.
I noticed that there's not a lot of windows on the side elevations, and that may be for privacy and desire. And a lot of new houses don't do that for privacy, but of course houses in our district didn't follow that sensibility, and they have a lot of windows. I would have no problem with you putting additional windows
On the side.
on the sides if you wanted to. That's a personal thing. I did think that the chimneys were awfully skinny. They look pencil-like in their narrowness, especially both the base structure that has then the shoulders.
Yes.
You could actually almost double the size, and I think it would look better than what's there. Or maybe not up to double, but close to it. They're awfully skinny. I think will not look as pleasant on the house in reality once they're built. I think they need to be wider, even if they're fake. The depth that you need.
Okay.
Being that it's 2 stories, you could actually have the shoulders above the second floor as if there's a fireplace on the second floor, and then the chimney from that point up, which might help it.
Okay.
But I think as they are, they're just really awfully skinny. I think it's a beautiful house, though.
Okay. Thank you.
What other comments from the commission?
Well, back to the windows, especially on the left side elevation, the lack of windows right now, and I think the suggestion of windows is good. I think that's going to be a lot of brick, a lot of just solid brick for the adjoining neighbor
Okay.
to have to face. I think we've dealt with that before in other areas.
I've also noticed on the new garage elevation, it shows what appears to be a car door gates on the right side. It didn't show up in our original packet. Is there an easement to the rear property that they're allowed to drive through? There's a dashed line on the new site plan that you gave us today, Robert. that appears that there's an ability to drive through there.
Well, they have a shared driveway. And
It is a shared drive, yes, on the right.
But does it go to the back to Vine Street? I guess I'm questioning why are the gates to the back property behind them?
I don't know.
I mean, it may be to hide garbage cans or, you know.
I do not know, sir.
It may be also to screen the pool pump. I don't know, but I would, you know, if it's, and it may be to hide a car for that matter, but I noticed the difference and I want to make sure the commission saw it.
And it may be there if they need to get equipment in
But you-
for the pool.
But you'd
that's not
have to
big.
get it from the neighbors to allow you to drive through. Is my reason I asked the question. If there was an easement there. I knew there was a shared driveway between the neighbor
Right.
facing Main, but I didn't know about it going through to the rear.
To the rear, okay.
I don't know if it does or not. I'm just asking, pointing out it's there and just asking why.
Yeah.
And for me, the other question I had was, there's proposed I call it an arrival court, that's what they call them in Nashville, the circular drives or horseshoe drives in the front. I have to say I'm a little concerned that the front yards are too small to have these arrival courts and parking in front of houses. Much larger yards can accommodate them, but small lots as this one is, I think it would overpower the house. And I would respectfully request that he not do it.
Not do the circular drive, okay.
I had that same concern. I thought that was, I just think for the size of that lot and as close as it will have to be to Main Street,
Right.
to the structure itself, I think it will be overpowering.
And we've acknowledged that there are some already on East Main in the district, but they have typically much larger lots.
Much larger. Right.
And I just think the lot is too small really for that. I know it would add a benefit to him to get in and out and for visitors, parties, parking, this kind of thing, but I have to say, I think, you know, with cars parked on there, it would be just too much for the front yard.
Okay. We'll pass that on.
Along that lines, when you're looking at that, Robert, if you could identify what the width of the lots are that do have the rival courts in there, would help to see how they compare width-wise.
Yeah.
In case Mr. Wade feels like, you know, what am I going to do with my guest? You know?
No, I understand.
But in general, he's real close to the guidelines that we have, save just a few comments. So I think you can take that and make it work.
We would want him to come before us when he's ready to submit his final documents with, you know, samples of materials, shingles and brick, and I understand he wants to add fences. If he wants to add fences, we'd like to see what that material is going to look like, all those various things, so we can help make decisions on what all he's doing.
Okay.
So he's purchased a lot and plans on constructing the home, and
Yes.
okay, well, it'd be nice to see an addition to a vacant lot, quite frankly.
Yep. There's not many of them left in the zone.
What other questions does the commission have?
I don't have any more questions, but I just want to thank the Wades for the preliminary look at this, their plans, and it allows the commission here to give some input to it before actual construction starts. So appreciate that preliminary input.
Glad we could do that.
Thank you. I don't think, since we don't vote on this issue, I just would like to thank you all and him particularly for coming forward. That really does help us. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Robert, what else do we have today?
The only other thing I have on the agenda is actually a continuation from last month's meeting. The commission didn't adopt or make a recommendation to pass on all of our regulations the review process. There was a couple of sticking points, I guess you could say, that we just didn't have a total agreement on. So in my agenda package to y'all, I sent some copies, some portions of the standards from the Department of Interior's standards that all historic zones and governments use when they adopt regulations, to give us kind of a guideline of how they work with historic buildings and sites. And I clipped those out and put them in the agenda package to give you an idea. I think one of the sticking points that we had was when we have an addition, is the addition going to be, could it be made of materials or made to look like something older, or should it be newer, or should it be, how should it relate to the structure itself? And we couldn't get a consensus agreement with all the commission members, so I think it's come back for some discussion, and these guidelines will probably help in the discussion of that, and it'll settle that problem. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer them, but this likes more or less come to an agreement of how we want to address this problem.
One of the items was on page 4 under spirit of enforcement, that a suggested paragraph or sentence or two has been added related to design guidelines. On that, if you'd like to read that into the record.
Sure. Under Roman numeral 4, it's on page 4 in the design guidelines under a spirit of enforcement. Starts out with, the design guidelines are based in accordance with the principles and recommendations set forth in the Secretary of the Interior Standards for Rehabilitation and Guidelines for Rehabilitating Historic Buildings, which is created to preserve the distinct character of a historic building and its site, while allowing for reasonable change to meet new needs. This is the way that the standards are written, and they're not black and white on how things will or will complement each other. I think the way it's written, it will allow the commission some leeway in deciding how to look in addition to see how it's going to adapt to the site and the building and surroundings. And that's what Chairman Thompson and David Ives, we met yesterday to come up with a draft of something to bring up for discussion. So we're proposing it for y'all to look at.
And this sentence is really intended to respond to alterations, additions, or any kind of modification to existing buildings, that they would follow these guidelines. And I think basically the guidelines said that additions or alterations would be indicative of the period in which they are built and should not take away or destroy or impact the integrity of the historic building. And without getting too detailed in the documents, we feel like this overriding principle would be a good way to respond to the question that Gib Backlund brought up last time. What comments does the commission have to this?
Well, I think that the standards 3 and 9 really are speak to these issues. 3, each property should be recognized as a physical record of its time, place, and use. Changes that create a false sense of historical development, such as adding conjectural features or architectural elements from other buildings, shall not be undertaken. And then 9, new additions, exterior alterations, or related new constructions shall not destroy historic materials or characterize the property. The new work shall be differentiated from the old. In other words, the intent was that when you look at the building, you should be able to tell what's been added from the original, but on the other hand be compatible with the massing, size, scale, and architectural features to protect the historic integrity of the property and its environment. So, I mean, I think that in those 2 standards there, and these were written first, these 10 were written first, and then the balance of the standards were fleshed out from these 10 original standards.
The other handout I had is it describes the district, neighborhood, building site, the roofs, windows, and all that. That, like Paul was saying, it comes after this introduction. So,
Without trying to, integrate all these specific principles word for word or more carefully into the document, we felt like if we reference those documents, that would be sufficient to give us the leeway to view each one on a case-by-case basis to make sure we follow those principles and try to interpret them for today's interpretation, because 20 years from now, when perhaps these documents are reviewed again, the way in which people view these additions or modifications may be somewhat different, and felt like this was a good compromise to respond to Gibbs' comments, but to also appropriately respond to the guidelines that the Department of the Interior set aside. So does the commission have anything regarding this particular item?
So what you're saying is, let's not include the Secretary of the Interior's standards for rehabilitation,
But reference them.
but reference them. I don't know. I don't know. It seems like it would be good for people to be able to see those guidelines. Or maybe it's just something that could be attached to the
It could be an
to the
attachment,
end.
absolutely.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's very informative.
I think as an attachment would be just fine.
okay.
How does the commission feel about that, making it an attachment?
I'm fine.
David?
I have no problem with it.
Paul?
I have no problem as long as we understand that the Secretary of the Interior standards were adopted as a condition of receiving tax credits. In other words, if you, they were a means of soft enforcement, in that if you did not, in some cases you'll say it shall not be allowed, that it means that you can do whatever you want to do, but if you don't do it this way, you don't get the tax credits.
Yep.
Whereas when we're looking at it, it's a little bit different situation. We can take a more flexible approach.
Interpretation of it, yeah.
Right.
That's why I didn't want personally to put these in word for word in the document. I wanted to say this is our guiding mantra of what we should be looking at, but it is a much more staunch, it's a very definitive approach, and whereas I think we have looked at it and what is a certificate of appropriateness, and it gives us a little bit of leeway. That gray area sometimes is benefit to the commission with trends as they change and this kind of thing, and so that's why I did not want word for word it integrated into this.
Yeah. It
Personally,
allows
I
more
did.
flexibility.
Yes, that was the intent for not referencing it, putting it exactly in there.
I see. That's fine. We have, if somebody did want to do something where they wanted tax credits, we would have that resource to give them, I guess.
But I think if we reference it and we still include it as an attachment, that's plenty fine, because you're referencing something that people don't perhaps have a copy, and there it is, and I have no problem with that.
Well, most of these things we've taken into consideration, and the commissions well before us have also, as far as the scale and introduction of new materials and type of materials that are available today, and is that the appropriate way to go with it? And it's been discussed on the Cantle residence for one, and then a couple others I can think of, especially with the scale of an addition and what's visible from the street, realizing that today's floor plan may need to be different than the floor plan of yesteryear.
There was one other item. It was related to chain link fences. If
Yeah.
you'd like to.
And on page 11 of the guidelines, under A, it's actually on page 11. It's the third full paragraph. It begins with, "The preferred type of fencing is formal wrought iron, wood, or brick. Chain link fences are generally inappropriate." And we added the generally inappropriate because in some cases they may be appropriate, in most cases they won't be. So it's the flexibility that I think that the commissioner, the historic commission needs to have in order to deal with, just about any case scenario.
Originally, like you say, the word generally was not in there in the previous document last time we met, and I suggested that as a compromise to respond to Mr. Backlund's comments. Personally, to me, chain link fences are an industrial type of fence. You saw them particularly in the 60s and thereon. They're an inexpensive fence, and I think that they are visually inappropriate for an historic neighborhood. We certainly have chain link fences in the neighborhood, and if you're welcome to repair damaged sections or replace chain link fencing that's there. We would never discourage that, but we wouldn't want to see suddenly a lot of chain link fences showing up in the neighborhood just because it's appropriate or considered appropriate. So if I had my druthers, I have to say, me speaking for myself, I would love to say their chain link fences are just inappropriate. But that's my own personal response, and I would throw it out to the rest of the commission on their opinions regarding this.
My question is more along the aluminum fences. Are we saying you can't do the aluminum?
No.
That if you wanted to do the wrought iron spindle look, it has to be
Well, we say
iron.
formal wrought iron. We could make it wrought iron, parentheses, aluminum, because we've allowed that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But as a material, it
Yeah.
would be allowed, okay.
Yeah.
And,
But it's the woven chain link, standard chain
Oh, yeah.
link fence that looks industrial or keeps somebody's dog in that I have personal concerns about.
Or even the invisible
These-
green or black chain link fence would not be appropriate.
I just,
I don't think so.
No.
Should we add a sentence that says concertina wire shall not be allowed under any circumstances?
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, we should probably vote on that because, I wouldn't agree with you, and as I pretty much stipulated at our last meeting, I don't like the word generally either. I just think they're inappropriate.
I'll go with that.
well, today we need to, I think, make a motion to accept both of the proposed changes, one adding the reference to the Secretary of the Interior standards, and then also this chain link. However, the commission would like to make a motion or what have you. But I personally would welcome taking out the word generally and just say they're inappropriate. But I can't make a motion.
You can, David.
Well, I'll make a motion that we accept the two changes that has been submitted to us with the exception of the word generally in this particular page 11, paragraph 2.
And to clarify that, though, then it says chain link fences are inappropriate.
Correct.
Okay? Do we have a second?
I second that.
Is there any further discussion regarding the motion?
Does that mean there's no circumstances under which we would allow a chain link fence? Or are we just saying
New fences.
new chain link?
New chain link fences.
But I think the word inappropriate, and if somebody has a chain link fence that was put in 1927 and they wanted to repair one section of it, we would probably allow that.
I think it's still going to be a case-by-case basis. I really do. Existing ones that, like Marie Miller had, I understand, a tree fall on her fence on Vine Street, and she was allowed to repair it. I just would not personally want to see new chain link fences where there never were any before. If it was enclosing two wings of a house that are from the rear and putting something in the back where nobody could see it from the public right-of-way, which is always our basis for these reviews, that perhaps that would be considered. But if it's visible from the public right-of-way, I just think that's just not a good thing. We have a motion. We have a second. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion as stated, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Then the motion carries.
Okay.
Thank you. Is there anything else in today's agenda, Robert?
Well, do you want to approve, make a recommendation to the, to
Yes.
keep this moving along?
Based on that, then the next thing is we have reviewed all these documents. We need to have, I guess, a motion to accept all the documents as revised, with including now today's changes, and that it be sent on to the zoning board, I believe.
Planning commission and
Review
city
the process for the entire commission and the public action.
Okay. After this, changes to the zoning ordinance will require a public hearing by the planning commission and city council. Since these documents aren't part of the zoning ordinance itself, they won't have a public hearing, but they did recommend, or I talked to the planning director, and he requested that it brought before the planning commission to let them know what we're doing and what's being proposed for the Historic Zoning Commission. And the city council will require a public hearing on the design guidelines and the rules of procedure to adopt the changes or any amendments. So this will be forwarded to the planning commission for their review and to the city council for their review and adoption.
Just be consistent with the other boards that are sort of subcommittee out of the Murfreesboro zoning ordinance, such as the BZA and the Airport Commission, that they do internal things it forwards on just for consideration to the PC. Okay.
That all being said, then the chair would welcome a motion to move these modified documents to the next step.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Great. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor of sending these revised documents on to the next step, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Great. We have those approved. Anything else, Robert?
I don't have anything else. That's all I have.
Wonderful. Then if not, the chair would welcome a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much.